It's gonna start with actually.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, welcome back to part 2 of this exciting conversation with me and Aga about INTPs and other stuff. Let's talk a little bit about INTPs. We both have experience with some INTPs in our lives. Me not currently really so actively, but what are your thoughts?
Very smart. Background, kind of interaction style, I would say. Like they're not going to be like out there, but they know what's going on. They know who's doing what, when, how they should be doing what, and they have a very important role in a society. I think they figure out what can go wrong, and they will let you know, like, look, this is what we need to be looking out for. Once they've gathered enough of their data, if they've got access to that data.
Like one of the most commonly raised problems presented to me, I'm asked about, like, is there a solution to this, is SE polar. Is there a solution to SE polar? The answer, of course, is no, but it's also that, and yet we see a range of apparent effectiveness in that from a third party's perspective among a set of INTPs. So what are your thoughts on SE polar?
In general, in NTPs or in terms of
No, INTPs or INFPs also have SE polar. And although I think it's less bad for them because
I think they get better with life. like but the environment of an NTP is usually like it looks like a disorganized environment, a little bit messy. They don't really notice things that they might be tripping over at and I get a little bit like that too, but maybe less for some reason.
It annoys me more quickly than it annoys them, I think.
It annoys you more. Yeah, they just like don't notice unless somebody tells them. At the same time, I think they can learn and they can, like, all right, if it really bothers people around me, then I will do something about it. That's how they would.
Fourth.
Yeah, that's how they you'd probably want to let them know. And I would suggest that maybe it's they do, and I think everybody is to some extent, like they want to do right by other people with having FE, so they don't want to look like they being in your way by not pulling their weight, but definitely take time to make a decision. So if you're working with an INTP, I think you need to let them give them time to think, figure things out, like and when an INTP makes a decision on the spot, that's I don't like that, because I feel like, from what I've observed, if it's a quick decision, it's often someone else pressured them to get something out of them in that moment and maybe slightly manipulate.
Somebody hit them in the SE.
Yeah, someone's hitting them in SE, making it sound like it's the end of the world, crisis. You have to do this now. So if an INTP is watching, if people around you are doing that to you, and you feel like there's a lot of drama and you have to react and be the hero and solve the problem, no, just breathe. Even if you take like 15 minutes to let your brain like catch up with, look, where's this person getting out of this interaction? What are they trying to gain from this? Because I've seen that happen, and that's not cool, and it's actually disastrous consequences if it's if it's an important
the thing
decision.
is, sometimes it is the case that he who hesitates is lost. But if that's the situation, then the INTP has lost. And so it's like, hopefully the INTP isn't actually facing those kind of dire, urgent need to action kind of situations. And most of the time that they're being portrayed as that is probably for other reasons than accurately describing the situation.
Yeah, it's usually some other disorganized type harassing them to get something done now because they haven't done their prep. It's almost like your emergency because your failure to plan and think things through now somehow is my problem. Somehow I need to solve your problem because you're just created all that mess. And I feel like INTPs, ENTPs have the ability to step into that and go like, fine, let's figure out this problem. But really, it's like, well, that person didn't do all of these things, and that has created this problem. So
it's a really complicated relationship with autonomy. I think that NTPs have, which it says on my shirt here, from what I named my debate.
oh yeah, autonomy debate. Nice.
Yeah. Anyway, because I think both kinds of NTPs want autonomy a lot, value it a lot, and yet can't really handle it. So we perform best when we're functioning like you're functioning now, as part of an organizational structure, but not the one who's in charge of everything. I mean, the thing is, we need somebody above us, because or at least the pressures of a structural architecture that keep us in line or something that
I think
exists already.
To be honest, I do think NTP can be in a deciding position, but they do need to have types around them to keep them accountable. So like I value and I rely on people coming to me and talking to me, and actually I do take people's views into consideration. And it's not like I'm a tyrant, definitely not that style.
Well, I mean, of course, if we're in a situation where there's a lot of other people involved, FE plays a lot of that role of structurally confining us to keeping our eyes on the team prize. But the thing that makes autonomy challenging for NTPs is that, to the extent that that's not defined externally, our autonomy leaves it up to us to define it. And in those circumstances, there's a lack of clarity, a conscious clarity about where one's energy should be directed. That's what I'm dealing with. So you're in a part of your life where you don't need to worry about autonomy, just like I didn't when I was working 60 hours a week. It was like, hey, I'm highly successful by everybody's standards. Now, granted, I had problems you don't have. Like I had a drinking problem that didn't hurt me at work at all, but that made me just hate myself all the time. But the challenge for me now is dealing with that autonomy where, okay, I'm free of those kinds of time constraints, but now what? Ultimately I end up spending a lot of time watching TV, I guess.
Yeah, it's like my holidays. Sometimes I say to myself, yeah, I'm going to be really productive on these holidays. That resonates really, really deeply with me. Yeah, we do operate well within structures and systems. I do think that to some extent we NTPs need discipline and someone around them to kind of not enforce that, but at least check in. I know for myself, like even on the weekends, I'm trying to keep my routine, and that's been life changing. Like I get up in the morning, I go to sleep at the time that I should be sleeping, and even just holding myself accountable to that is it's a struggle. It's like every day I need to.
You gotta get enough sleep. You got to.
Oh God! But Eric, I don't know if you've got this, but it's like every morning I need to talk to my brain. And it tries to convince me to just stay in bed. Why you don't have to? Why today? This is too comfortable. And then I need to convince myself back to say, right, we gotta get up because we have to go to work. We have to get up. We've been there, brain. We go there every morning. We gotta get up.
I just wake up and go, oh God.
Yeah, this first time like another day.
Just pretend for a second that it's not getting up time. It is though. Oh, okay, get up. And then it's like I'd always be like, okay, well, at least I'll go have a cigarette. And
Yeah, you gotta comfort yourself somehow, right?
that would help get me out of bed.
I have I do in the morning. I also do that another time when this voice switches off and then just tries to convince me not to do it is I take a cold shower at the end of my shower in the morning, and I've done it so many times that by now it should be routine, right? But every time before I switch that water to cold, my brain tries to convince me, maybe not today. We've done it so many times. I really don't like it. This is going to be
why do you do it then if you don't like it?
all right. And then I'm like,
why do you do it if you don't like it?
I love the feeling after I've done it. I like putting myself into situations where I feel uncomfortable to some extent, because then I feel like it's like this. If I do hard stuff in the morning, then my day will be good. But if I already start my day by sleeping too long, not doing a cold shower, I'm already like,
you're behind the 8 ball already. Yeah, I totally know exactly what you mean.
When you gotta hit it, and then you're like, look, we're doing well. You just keep going.
Right. And then the point is, even if you stop doing well later on, you have the stuff that you've done already doesn't go away.
Yeah, and you don't feel like you've wasted. You feel like, and I do actually think that it's not about being perfect every single day, but just enough good stuff that you do for yourself, for your health, routine, work. You need to just do enough to maintain a stable level. Everybody's gonna have an off day. Sometimes I'll sleep in, but you gotta those are like exceptions. Like you gotta keep enough the good stuff, the routine, and then
it sounds like you've got a very conscious and pretty well practiced kind of way of making yourself be not let SI harms happen to you.
Oh yeah, I do. I had to tell myself, and it came from just me not performing well when I didn't sleep, from me getting like moody when I don't sleep or when I don't eat properly. So I tell myself because I used to feel guilty for respecting SI, because that for me it's a waste of time to eat well. I'm just going to have one quick meal and then I can go back to whatever I was doing or watching or reading or listening to. So now I'm like, okay, the SI is keeping my body. It's actually feeding the brain. So every day it's like convincing myself that I need to respect SI, and then my life will be better. I'll be healthier. I'll have more energy. I will have a brain fog. It will just, but it's a dialogue, Eric. It's not like it's a struggle every day.
It stays that way. It doesn't stop being that dialogue. I'm still having that dialogue with myself all the time. That includes pooping. Like, no, Eric, you need to poop now. You have it. Your body's telling you to poop now. I know that it gives you a grace period. It says, okay, you can poop now, from now until now. Any time within here, you can go poop. That would be fine. But if you say, oh, well, let me push it to the end of the grace period, you might miss this window. And then it goes back up inside.
Yeah, whereas other people would just get up and go to the loo, be back by the time you talked to yourself about whether right? I have that with water as well. I have on my phone I have a hourly reminder to drink water, and it literally chimes, because if I don't think about it, it doesn't. So I'm almost trying to cheat the system a little bit, have water, and when the phone chimes, I drink water. Like respecting SI and having disciplined routine for NTP, life-changing. It's just, you just gotta get up on time. You gotta go to bed on time. Well, you gotta eat, drink plenty of water, wear clean clothes, get those clothes washed or wash them, like basic stuff.
I mean, and the difference for somebody like me who's on an Adderall cycle, usually, not really right now because I got COVID, but
what does that do actually? I'm not
well,
familiar.
it means my sleeping schedule goes, I don't sleep at all, and then I sleep way too little.
All right.
And then I start sleeping normal, and then I sleep way too much. And so basically it covers the arc of a couple of weeks. The first week or so, I'm highly productive, although not necessarily effective. And then the second week is kind of petering down into ineffectiveness or even counter effectiveness with just being so meowy and yelling at everybody, basically. And then the week after that is sleepy week, where I just
That's like
crash out.
okay, Eric, no excuses there. That's like every woman's menstrual cycle. What you're describing to me is basically a woman. Like, what do you think? Women are not designed to be like 100% level. When women are on their days, they get sleepy. I get very sleepy. I have less energy. I need to sleep more. The hormonal changes are like crazy, you know.
I
Like,
am very womanly. I've
and
always been very womanly.
then you have like the first week after your days, you feel like all this energy and you kind of look great and your skin looks really nice and bright. Then in the middle you get like almost overactive because obviously your body wants to make a baby, right? So it's
You're
trying
ovulating.
to, yeah. Then you've got the period afterwards, just before the next period, where your hormones are like your testosterone goes up, your estrogen goes down, and that makes women a bit more cutthroat, argumentative, a little bit more emotional. And then during the period, you get again too sleepy. So you got those phases. you still gotta.
So the thing is, what I've noticed during the early phases of on is whether or not I'm able to get myself to stay on track in terms of eating and staying hydrated impacts incredibly dramatically the whole month. So just as you were talking about the day, right, is that how I begin the cycle, and whether I start out smart by eating a lot and drinking a lot, even though I'm not hungry or thirsty or thinking about it, and uh, and then trying to get maybe a couple hours of sleep here and there rather than none. If I successfully get out the gate well, then the whole experience is dramatically different than if I blow out in the first couple of days because I've not been attending to SI shit. I let myself get all slimy. I don't eat anything, and I get all weird feeling, and it even takes me a while still to go, okay, Eric, the reason things are seeming gray is because you're hungry, you stupid moron.
Yeah, I don't know how Adderall works, but I know that certain activities, and this is not mine, this is taken from the Dr. John Gray, Mars Venus guy. He was really, really famous in like 10-20 years ago. He's still on YouTube, and I really like watching him. But he was effectively looking at the balances of hormones in female versus male body, how much you need to operate well. So what he's saying is, in general, what they've discovered is activities such as thinking, solving problems, taking action in anyone, either it's female or male, will increase your testosterone levels. Whereas other activities such as, for example, nurturing, creativity, they being with people, they will stimulate oxytocin, and they would actually they'll create more kind of feminine hormones. So it might be that you just gotta do stuff, and that guys they just need so much less of female hormones. If you do more during that time, maybe your testosterone spikes, and you've already noticed that it keeps you feeling better.
I mean, the thing is, to the extent that my moods and stuff link to hormones, I've never noticed or considered any such linkage or patterns. I've never thought in those terms. So and there's not an actual biological event around which to build a hormone cycle like there is with a woman. So it's just conceptually, I've never considered hormones to be impactful at all in my way of being. I always do find there to be linkages between the amount of time I direct towards SI stuff and how happy I am. If despite being well fed and stuff, I'm still feeling the crackles, as I like to call it, which is this feeling of not having SI in general enough, then it means I need to organize my space a bit better. I need to, stop wasting, stop using shelf space so inefficiently or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just to make myself feel like there's an external order to my environment that allows me to be crackle free.
Yeah. Okay. But then it does lead to, it doesn't rule out the potential of the fact of taking action always stimulates certain hormones, right? Like testosterone. And perhaps by taking Adderall, you are basically putting your body on to more of a, roller coaster.
But I bet you this guy wouldn't qualify. Most of what I'm doing is taking action. It is, but I don't think he would qualify. It's not the sort of action people are taking that they're checking against to see when it generates testosterone. They'd call it, I don't know what they call it. They'd say it's creative endeavor, I guess. It's like, is talking about public policy taking an action, but talking about art being nurturing, or what?
It's like decision making. I know he's got a whole list. They've measured that stuff. They like put people to do stuff, and then they measure their hormones. There's all sorts of activities that you can do, but decision making and critical thinking, solving problems without physical action. I'm not talking you have to take you have to go outside and dig a hole. It's also taking in a process and thinking, resolving problems.
Those all raise testosterone.
Yeah, which is a lot of women now struggle with just being a little bit too on, especially women in positions of high power. So when you get home, you can call it SI, or you could just call it like going back into chilling and relaxing, which just regulates everybody.
So I mean, I do notice massive differences in mood immediately upon eating, if and when I'm genuinely hungry.
Right. Okay.
It's sudden and overwhelming. It's like, oh my God, the difference between 5 minutes ago and now. But I still, I believe you that it links to these chemical interactions and stuff. But I've never really thought about it in those terms, because I guess what you're saying is that is kind of a self-reinforcing process, and then when you go home and you switch out those things, that you're experiencing the opposite emotion, or the opposite chemical, or whatever.
Correct, and that's why it's sort of women and in order for the body to operate in the right way, like men need more testosterone, women need more progesterone and estrogen. So, and I think those ratios are what is changing it up is that for women that do manly jobs and actions, the action itself in their body will stimulate testosterone. Same for men. If they are not taking enough action, their testosterone will go lower. So it's like you just have to have balance of doing enough activities that stimulate the hormones that will make your body feel good. Because if your body's off balance, then whether you're male or female, you kind of feel agitated, irritated. Yeah, your sleep could go. People can lose weight or gain weight. He's got tons of books. That guy's written like 20 books on that. So
are we generating testosterone right now?
For me, no. I would say we're connecting. This is more of a oxytocin. I'd say this is more like we're building connections, bonding. That's more of a nice feminine in terms of relationship building. But if I had a massive problem to you, if I was sitting here crying and I said, Eric, you need to help me with this, solve this problem for me, then you'd be like, oh, okay, let's focus, right? Different hat. Let's just solve this. And your chemistry changes. It's quite It's quite basic, really, that knowledge that we've just not, we assume like we're the same, but there still are
we're not very conscious of how our hormones are affecting us, is what you're saying. But is that really useful information? Unless, maybe more so if there's a central hormone event like a period to build your hormone cycle around. It doesn't seem very useful information to me. Like, framing it in those terms, I don't know how that changes my understanding of things at all. I guess it explains the chemical source of the mood shifts and stuff when they occur.
Well, it can improve your sleep, which then improves your ability, I guess, to focus. Maybe you know, that's, you won't have this, you know, when you've got the Adderall up and down. Maybe you can reduce that a little bit. I don't know.
I mean, so like being aware of which behaviors link to which things, and purposefully avoiding or engaging in certain behaviors to promote certain hormone release. Is that what you're advocating?
That's literally what he's that's literally what he is presenting.
Huh.
Yeah.
So then who's the judge of whether or not you're hitting the right emotion with your hormone plan?
Emotions, I don't know. I mean, you gotta know how you feel, right? So it's gonna have to come down to how you're feeling. But also it's like you can probably get tests to just measure how much levels of what you've got. So those tests are pretty arbitrary.
So basically, if you're saying like a lady is uncomfortable, maybe she needs to do stuff that reduces testosterone and raises either progesterone or estrogen.
Yeah, it's usually a connection. Yeah, it's usually a task like, so statistically speaking, women, when they stress, will want to talk about it with other people around them to get the stress out. And that's because that stimulates certain hormones that develop connections within the tribe to keep the tribe together. Women were like holding on those relationships. Now, again, I'm talking about the 80%, the 80-20 rule always applies. For men, if they had a problem, it would usually be something external was attacking the village. They needed to get together, solve the problem, or there was not enough food. Again, they have to go out and bring some food, maybe, right? So men usually deal with solving problems by thinking about it, creating solutions. You won't really find them together and just like crying and talking and hugging like you do with women. And incidentally, and this is where it happens, incidentally, even if a man does sit with women and cries, he produces the same hormones as a woman would. If a woman decides to shut down and she just goes, becomes angry, resentful, she won't have enough feminine hormones to feel good. So all those things are interlinked. Your behaviors are always interacting with your body. It's the whole system. And women need more certain things that men need less of, and vice versa. So men need something like 20% less, 20 times more testosterone to operate well than women do.
I think I'm much more likely to demonstrate my emotions than I am to talk about them. So it's like, I may, when you say like, well, when you feel stressed out, you want to talk about it with people. Well, feeling stressed out may end up as an impetus to talk with people about something, but that stress is more likely to come out in how I present the thing I'm talking about than for it to actually be the subject. And to the extent that there's kind of a linkage, it's an ancillary one, like this thing stresses me out, but that's not why I'm stressed out.
And that would be more a masculine representation of it. You still have a need to get it out, like I do. I would enjoy talking about it a bit more. No, I wouldn't enjoy talking about it, but I would feel better after saying it. It's almost like a cleanse. It's out now. Fine, right? I expressed it in a different way, but my one is more of I would like someone to listen and empathize with me, and that makes me feel better. That would be I guess the difference. I want this to be an interaction.
You know what I found to be a frustrating interaction between me and Rachel, which there are very few, but she asked me a question about what Enneagram type she was, and 7 and 5, and or 7 or 9, and these kind of questions. And it's like I don't want to be with her anyway. The person who gets the gist of what you're saying, but refuses to address that because you didn't word it right or something like that. I don't want to be that person in general, but I definitely don't want to be that person with her. And so questions that I might, in when voiced by other people, that I might critique as flawed questions, I'm much more prone to trying to answer. But when I start trying to articulate anything about Enneagram shit, I just it turns to mush in my hands, and I can't even go anywhere with it, because it's all based in our, I guess, emotional habits conceptually.
That leads me really well to the concept that has helped me with these kind of conversations. And I, by no means, I'm not the best, but last time we spoke about Voltology, right? Which is and I believe that this is similar, that we were looking at similarities between facial expressions. So you said something along the lines, I don't think I look like many people, or something like that. Then since then, I found at least 2 NTPs. When I think they NTPs, I think they look like you. And you can find them on YouTube and listen to them and see how they talk and what systems they've created. So, I mean, I don't know if you have an ability to open up your email, because I've put those people down. One of them in particular had created a system of, it's almost like a fake empathy. It's basically, how do you communicate with people that are non-intellectuals? So what he's done, it's like a learning new language. Like, okay, I just need to ignore all of your words. The words you use, nothing. Just ignore the words. Look for the emotions, and this is how you find it. And this is rooted in the need, and the needs are these basic needs. And I do think it's a clever NTP trying to find a way to communicate through emotions. And I love that guy. I've read that book.
I think 1 and 3, I see the similarity in the appearance, but I think number 2 looks rather more like either an STJ or an STP. But I mean, I don't trust that kind of typing to people. But your explanation of this FE, how to FE bullshit based on the kind of idiot you are, is that basically what it is?
So basically, he says his concept is called nonviolent communication, and that guy used to provide support for like hostage situations, when he would actually negotiate for people to like stand down and save lives, and mediate in places of conflict like Middle East, etc. So he's learned very early on that you don't look at what they say, you look at the emotional subcontext, but you don't even look at the emotional subcontext as much as what need isn't met or is trying to desperately be expressed. So he's divided the communication process into 3 stages. What they say, he said, just ignore it. The emotion, that's good, because at least you can plug into how they feel at the moment. But what you really need to sit is what they need at this point, was not being met. And I just love the way he laid that out. And I felt like it was, I mean, he's figured out that process so well that he just needs to be like, I feel like he just needs to be celebrated, because he's had, I don't think he's famous enough. I love his book, and just, yeah.
Well, it reminds me of what I was talking with Rachel yesterday about the video Debate Coach Reacts to Jordan Peterson Twitter ban that I made, which is a very sort of detached assessment of, I don't know, you probably didn't watch it, but a detached assessment of the realities of this as an issue, and how various parties try to use it as a boogeyman, or to use it to build boogeymen around. Regardless, I said to Rachel, this won't get very many views, even though it's about Jordan Peterson, and so it's got a little, and it's got topicality going on right now. It should have some snap. It won't get very many views though, because what it does correctly that I normally don't do correctly is it positions the audience as included. In other words, it doesn't position them. It assumes you're one of us enlightened ones judging the unenlightened. If I'm successfully presenting my ideas, and that's like a bare minimum that I've got to do to get people to afford it their attention. But what it doesn't do and can't possibly do is avoid the fact that most people who watch it are not.
Yeah. Why is he always crying also?
What?
Why is he always crying? He gets so emotional so fast. Sometimes you watch him and he just goes like, well, I was thinking about this topic, and he just gets so, because I know some people said that he might be an ENTP, but he's not an ENTP.
Peterson, he's an ENTJ. He's an ENTJ.
Because that FI just comes out like randomly. It's like,
it's because he's operating in an environment that requires him to use his sixth slot function, and his, it's too much. It's like he wants to validate with the correctness thing with TI, and he's having to use a lot of NE along with his NI in order to try to validate on that ground. He's been asked to debate and stuff. It's putting way too much pressure on his sixth slot NE, because ultimately the NI is only operational value. So it's like he's ultimately not good about considering the largest frame, even though he's constantly using understanding frames beneath that frame. He's not actually engaging at any point the frames that matter.
He sometimes confuses me. He just goes, I feel like, where is this going now? Okay, now you've lost me. Now I feel like we were going somewhere, and then he's interjected some metaphors that don't represent what he was just trying to represent. And I'm like, that's an excellent example for something completely else. Not what he's trying to say.
Well, the other thing is his linkages between animal behaviors and people behaviors is done without any explication of what that linkage tells us, if anything, and under what circumstances it tells us things. Because we can always draw comparisons between human behavior and certain kinds of animal behavior in certain species, and show how the manner in which we understand things is, in this particular point of perspective, is maximally realized in this species over here that does it in some equivalency in the extreme. And that tells us something meaningful about human experience with it, but it doesn't unless you can establish specifically an advocacy behind it of some sort, which he typically has, and then it only links because that's your advocacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what makes him so appealing?
Well, he's the first thing that made him so appealing is that he was somebody who wasn't an idiot who was being intellectually persecuted for a perfectly reasonable position because it was unpopular at a university.
I see. Okay, so circumstances also helped to propel him.
Like somebody at the time, I remember somebody commenting on one of my videos where I was kind of asking, like, why is people so enamored? He had genuine skin in the game. His career was on the line, and he continued to fight the good fight despite the risks to him personally. He was appropriately indignant about this ridiculousness that made something that should have always been like a social thing into some kind of rules from society thing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But then ultimately he became a symbol of people who want to make that shit a boogeyman. And instead of, and he, for a while, he seemed to be trying to kind of straddle the fence on that, whether he was on the boogeyman people's side or not. But he's just gone full boogeyman at this point. Yeah. He's just, and like you said, the emotion is because he's seeing these things as impactful because he's experiencing them as his attachment to these narratives or mythologies that he's created about movements through history. Like, we have to worry about postmodernism. Like, when is the last time postmodernism ever even came up and talked to you? I mean, I don't remember the postmodernism ever doing a goddamn thing. It's like not getting that you're reifying something that doesn't have any actual agency, and then building argumentation blocks on that metaphor without recognizing the fact that that you're just building marshmallow soup. You know,
there is no enemies there. Like, okay, right.
Sure, there are plenty of people who express wrongness in offensive ways, on, you know, who also self-identify with this team, that team, or some other sub-team. And the problem is, because every manner of wrongness is expressed throughout the whole population, there's no, we should avoid any kind of calculation that doesn't focus on the process. We're talking about public business, and so the adjudication of it needs to be based on public processes of validation, like whether or not it's logical rather than whether or not it's emotionally resonant, whether or not it's true rather than whether or not it's convenient, whether or not it has broad consensus rather than whether or not it has big impact for a small number of people, and then whether or not it has it's rendered in impacts that are communicative rather than in physicality impacts. Those things are the frames of reference we need to use to adjudicate public matters, because they're the only ones that are fair to everybody, and they are definitionally public matters, means they're everybody's business. So I don't remember where I was going with this, but the point is, if you start with a frame of reference that says society is a problem that needs to be solved, or paradigm is a problem that needs to be solved, then you're going to fundamentally position yourself in some kind of us versus them kind of thing that renders you inherently not doing it right, because you're not, that's not what you use for public business like that.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah.
I mean, is there anybody who's a political pundit of any sort who does seem currently to be making sense in a way that doesn't play this team game that's popular? I don't think anybody watches that shit because it's boring, you know?
I mean, if a politician makes sense, they are immediately being ridiculed and outcast from the scene, because politics is not about being right and making sense. It's about upholding the status quo, which is illogical.
It's not about that either. It's not about upholding the status quo.
It's about holding on to power so that there is no.
No, politics is something, is a process engaged in by everybody who talks and thinks about politics equally. Okay. Yes, we have legislative bodies and things like that that actually do the public's work. But I'm talking about the political process is one of public discourse fundamentally. It is not one encapsulated by the individuals currently in power or wielding power. And to the extent that we're fixated too much on the mechanisms by which people attain and hold power, it's distracting from the fact that forget those changing bits. Let's focus on the parts that don't change, the processes of actual public policy and public business. So that's the problem with that whole notion, is that that's not reality, right? It may be the case that people in power want to stay in power, and that people who are decision makers are making decisions that are in their own interest rather than in the public's interest. But that just drives home what I'm saying. We need to use the attentional mechanisms of public accountability in doing the public business. And only people who prioritize those as values, like me, ought to be empowered to do the public business.
But a part of the entire process is the side of politics which you don't talk about, like lining up and selecting the candidates who will not be like you. So there's
it's right, but at some point, some individual, you have to direct the responsibility to the actual individuals. It's not like the people who are currently in making decisions in political parties are not examples of the same problem that's population wide. They are themselves examples of it. They're not outside of this process themselves going, I'm going to exploit this. Not like, thing is, there were originally probably people in charge who said, I'm going to exploit this cognitive failure of individual human beings, this very consistent, in order to make my party win, because I'm both smart and amoral and don't give a fuck, and didn't probably realize that it was going to cascade the way it did into this huge discursive clusterfuck of a disaster that exists in the status quo. Anyway, but the point is, the people who are currently doing things in politics, they're just examples of these people, but with power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there are also systems that would keep people like you from entering the political scene. And that is basically, we're not going to sponsor someone that says the truth. I don't think they would. Also, I mean, is there an element
Who's they?
Well, anyone who's got interest in keeping up, for example, the policies that will make them more profitable.
The thing is this: the way, at least, like contributing money to a candidate in America, anyway, is supposed to work is if you have a corporation and you hear a candidate here saying, "These are my policy prescriptions," and you go, "Oh shit, that lines up with my interests," then you vote for that guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
What people assume, which is not the case, is that this company is more likely to give you money if that money is supposed to make you go along with them. Instead, they know you're less trustworthy to go along with them if they're having to buy it. So, in fact,
the person who would be matching from the core would match what they're trying to achieve, right?
And the other thing is that there are a huge multiplicity of various moneyed interests who are in conflict with one another over what helps your business. If you are in green energy production, then government subsidies for green energy production helps your business a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to be in favor of candidates who support subsidizing green energy because in your interests. If you are in green energy, you may additionally choose to hire lobbyists to go spend their energy convincing people to either participate in, vote for, support, or whatever your particular proposed legislation. And people have lots of problems with that, and they assume that corporations therefore running the show. But in fact, a candidate who favors policies that are also supported by a wide array of corporate interests for their own reasons is not necessarily representing corporate interests at all. So I'm opposed to the capital gains tax entirely, right? I think it should be completely eliminated for very good reasons. And yet there might be plenty of moneyed interests out there who go, if you could make that happen, and it would be a priority of mine, then that serves my interest financially enough to support you, right? Nevertheless, my policy has nothing to do with helping that person, or that person. It has to do with what makes any fucking sense whatsoever. In other words, I get to be useful because I'm correct, rather than what most people try to do, which is to be useful as a way of being correct.
Yeah, I see. I understand the point you're making. I would just like to point out that I think the resources available for, let's use your example of green energies. The resources available to successfully lobby, support campaigns, as well sponsor, would be tremendously bigger in already established corporations, because there isn't just that many huge profitable green energy players there who would give you that kind of money, right?
So why is there so much subsidizing of green energy shit, both in the EU and in the US?
Well, I guess there is enough public backup to allow that.
And you know what's hilarious is people hate it when the oil and gas companies take advantage of legislation designed to promote green energy. And then later on they go, why are these oil companies getting these tax loopholes, these tax subsidies from the government, which aren't even subsidies at all. They're just, you don't have to pay taxes on money directed towards research and development for that shit. It's fucking ridiculous. It's like, it's such another one of those things where people want to make boogeymen and say like, well, the oil companies are bad. Well, the oil companies are the ones most positioned to actually do meaningful research into energy that's less polluting and more sustainable, you know? Anyway.
They are, but yeah, they're not actually doing it, are they?
Well, I mean, thank God, because we wouldn't want to forget that the engine of human prosperity is the capacity to use energy to do meaningful work for one another. And if we don't exercise that capacity, then we get to see people experience mass poverty, like we're seeing now with this huge inflation. When you constrain people's ability to do useful work for one another, the total amount of wealth on the world is impacted negatively, but the amount of currency goes into the economy doesn't change because that's not as responsive to reality as it should be. And then you have huge inflation like we got in the US right now, 9.1%, and everything fucking super expensive, and everyone feels a lot poorer.
Yeah, currently in UK, petrol's gone up by sort of like 80%. So that is huge. That drives all the other costs up as well. You know the pictures.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Dad. Hi.
Can you run me down to Firestone about 1?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
You know the pictures that I sent you. Are you aware of John Hitchinson?
I don't know either of the people. I'm just basing it just purely on what I thought their faces looked like.
Okay, right. So he was a scientist, a Canadian scientist working with energy, and he was basing most of his experiments on Tesla's works. He's not alive anymore. I think he died in like 80 something. But his work has attracted a lot of traction, sort of a lot of interest around the world. Different governments, different. Yeah, I guess he was living before the internet as well, so he didn't get famous. But he effectively, if you had a moment to watch one of his videos, which is out there, it's only 40 minutes, but he talks about like resolving a lot of human problems, and he just like shows how he how he started to create sustainable energy, which I can't get my head around that concept. I've only watched it once, but he's a tremendously clever guy. So yeah, I recommend you watch that. He's got some interesting ideas, or had at least. So
And now he's dead, huh?
now he's dead, and he died of course there was a massive conspiracy because he died in a plane crash, and there was all shady stuff. So a lot of conspiracy theorists says the video describes how like the Canadian equivalent of CIA came into his lab and seized everything because he wouldn't sell his patents to do something, and he's just like there sitting like, these people are here, they're taking my stuff, obviously what I'm going to do is just going to go and build it again because it's all in my head. And then he said, then they told me not to, so I just told them to stick it, and then I did it again. So he wasn't very cooperative in terms of helping them monetize his models, and became very unpopular. But yeah, I listened to him and I was like, what a guy. Like, he's like real life Emmett from Back to the Future.
Yeah, I've also encountered some, you encounter occasionally in the world as public figures, NTPs, either I or E, who have what I would call like high level math smart or something, or science smart that I am never going to have, and probably you aren't going to ever have either. And
that's what he says. He says, like, I'm not math smart. I intuit all of my creations. Basically, I put them together. I visualize how it could work. Then I run a bunch of experiments. Sometimes it works out, but don't ask me how the maths work on this stuff. Like, I can build stuff. He literally said exactly what he said.
Oh, okay. Well, he might not be one of them, but I do encounter them, like Richard Feynman, who was an ENTP and was also won the Nobel Prize in physics. So like people, and Einstein, who was an INTP, and David Berlinski, who's probably an INTP, maybe an ENTP, or he's a math guy. These people impress me because they applied themselves full blast in areas that require full legitimacy and no bullshit,
Yeah, and it's scrutinized, right? It's scrutinized by other smart people as well. So you got to get that right. You got to prove. And I think scientists are the coolest people. Like, yeah.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like, to get in that frame of reference where your shit's evaluated only by people who can really understand whether it's worth anything or not, then it means that whatever it is you're explaining never makes sense to regular people for a long time, if ever.
Oh, yeah. You call it crazy for the first 50 years, and then it becomes revolutionary.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, though. If you're working in those narrowly defined kind of accountability fields that have peer-reviewed journals and scientific methodology that actually is consistent and stuff like that, like math is as TI sound a science as you can possibly imagine, because it's not predicated on the iffiness of real world phenomena. So when people can get to that level of accountability checking, then they don't have to also deal with people who can't understand them having an opinion about it.
Yeah.
Which can be frustrating.
Although people love doing that, I really don't get it, but I don't like it, and I don't feel that's right. Okay, thank you so much for that opinion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would really recommend it. Like, if you had 40 minutes, watch that guy. He there's some golden nuggets. He just says stuff, and I'm like, that really sounds ENTP-ish. And the same for the Marshall Rosenberg, his system to, like, how do I communicate with these feelers? The first rule is like, don't even listen to the words. The words mean nothing. I know it might mean how people use words is not the meaning of what they're trying to tell you.
But basically, your job is to translate what their words that mean nothing into a statement about their needs or a meeting of those needs with your words.
Yeah, he gives his book, and his book is written from that the perspective. You know, when we started talking, you said, I'm going to give you an example, and then I'm going to show the pattern, extrapolate that pattern. The entire book is written like that. I once coached this person, and this is how they communicated, and this is what they said, and this is what we asked them, and this means blah blah blah. And that's like again another thing that made me think there's definitely ENTP-ish qualities to him. Yeah.
Well, and I can show you how ESTP deals with that differently, because like Legends Fall said in response to my Jordan Peterson video, well, what about these other occasions where he says meow, meow, and meow? So the thing is, it is the case that he may have stated other things explicitly that address partisanship or something like that, but those specific things are not indicative of a meaningful rule here.
Mhm.
And that's why NI fourth is not as good at explaining things that are at the top level frame as NI fifth. It's because it prioritizes the individual instances ultimately, and their role in suggesting other rules as more significant than which singular rule predominates, because that's their absolute value.
And if you go for that, I just made a jump into something else. I was thinking about when people are talking to you. What I'm taking from this is people open their mouths for different reasons, and if certain people open their mouths to think out loud or convey a point, a lot of people just want to feel important for a moment. Some people just want to be seen. Some people just want to it's like a desperate cry to just say, just notice me, acknowledge what I just said. You can disagree, but just, all right. It's like that. I don't know, just.
Yeah, I'm projecting my operational value onto everybody, assuming that when they're saying things, they're making arguments. They're not.
No, they don't even mean what they're saying. They use words in a different way. They just use words to express how they would feel. And so it's that you know, oh, you never take the rubbish out. Well, I can very clearly prove to you that I have taken the rubbish out last Friday and the Friday before. So what are we really talking about? Do you know what I mean? It's just
but what really bugs me is when people start co-opting precise terms that exist in order to make precise distinctions to convey to people a general mood of concision, you know, or preciseness.
Yeah, it's like that.
Like, for example, the word correlation kept getting used in this show I was watching in ways that convinced me in no uncertain terms that nobody on the show knew what that word meant. They were using it because it made what they were saying sound more sciencey. And they got the general idea that not every time two things are connected in time are they causally related.
Yeah.
But it's like they just toss it around willy-nilly so that now it reinforces wrong people's perceptions that it doesn't mean anything really. It's good enough to gesture its scienciness and then get credit for that.
Yeah, and it's like, and another thing I want to tell you, and I know this little detail and this little detail and this little detail, it doesn't really link. It correlates. How does it correlate? Well, maybe it all came from me. That's the only link. Originated in my mind. It's vague enough. But yeah, just can you explain the process of the exact correlation here? Like, how did you go there?
Well, the other thing is two unique events that aren't instances of something you can repeat can't have a correlation. So it's like,
Yeah.
I got that shocking phone call out of the blue, and then after that, Mary fell down the stairs and broke her ankle. Well, you can't have multiple instances. You can't line up or have repeatability on either side of it. So there's no way to establish any kind of correlation. If you say like this happened and this happened, I wonder if there's a correlation. It literally means nothing at all, right? It's like it's I don't what they mean is I wonder if this phone call caused Mary to fall in some magical way. But they don't want to say that because the answer to that is clearly no, right?
Like, fate. Was it fate? Was it the universe? Was it some other magical power that made it all like that?
We don't know what it is, but just that, there could be a correlation. I mean, that doesn't even mean anything, it's like, okay, you have to have one half of it be repeatable to say at least one half of it. And then you repeat that and see how many times the other part happens and then you compare that against random in some way.
Yeah. Well, it took me years to realize what they actually say is not what they actually mean. And people use words as just a way of letting me know what emotional state they're in and how they would like to extent in which they are aware, they will try to narrow down to what made them go into that state or what would get them out of that state into a more pleasant state. So it's
I think in that instance, they're trying to make sure they're doing FE management, right? They're trying to make sure they sound like critical thinkers while engaging in complete cognitive tomfoolery.
The amount of time I just need to just like zip it and just go, okay, this person just wants to be important right now.
Well, they just want to make sure that you don't realize that they don't know what they're talking about.
I'm also often going in my mind like, okay, that was a complete contradiction to what this person just said 30 seconds ago. That's interesting. Oh, how did they get there now? Because
and you practice keep staying shut up about it, huh?
Yeah. Well, I practice being quiet, letting them talk for an amount of time. Sometimes I look at my watch and say, I'll give him 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and then I will get to the point, because they just feel, and I understand that it's I don't work like that, but it doesn't mean that I shouldn't work with people who have different needs. Some people just really need to feel important or seen, and if that's what they need in order to achieve what we need to achieve, fine.
And I experience the equivalent with another extroverted function in the fourth and Rachel. Sometimes people just need to make some sort of impact. Like that occurs when Rachel feels like shopping occasionally for something.
Like SE fourth, right? Oh, I see that. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, what is it that you want to get, or what do you need? Well, she doesn't want anything in particular or need anything in particular. She wants to shop. It doesn't happen all the time, very frequently. But sometimes that's just a way that she creates just sort of has this. I need to realize some impacts to stay healthy.
I see that. I will watch out for that. I know what you mean. More of an SE user kind of thing. I will, even if they just need to come in and change one thing or rearrange one thing, now they feel like they've added value.
It's also a third slot TI thing, making sure that she's being treated fairly by exercising her ability to spend money arbitrarily on something.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I think much more frequently it happens for reasons of F, like you're saying, where either people want to be perceived as meh, or people want to just have a desire to have their voice heard, or to be seen as contributing to something like that, you know.
What is also what is this one? You didn't invite me to this party. Well, I've invited you to 4 before and you always said no. Okay, would you have come? No, but it would have been nice to be invited. And for someone like me, that actually hurts me, because I feel like if I've invited a particular person, that was an ISTJ. So I stopped inviting this particular ISTJ. And after, probably, I'm not joking, like 7 times that this person says some excuse, can't do it, canceling, I'm like, you can't, I can't, I'm not doing it anymore. And it ended up with us not seeing each other for a year, until that person kept reaching out a couple of times. They then canceled. So I'm like, I'm done with this person. It's just like so unreliable. But when we met, she said, like, you stopped inviting me to things. I'm like, what? No, I'm not doing that anymore. Where is that coming from? Like, I just want to, it's again feeling important, isn't it? I don't want to come, but I want to feel significant enough to be invited. I guess it's that one again.
I mean, I guess it's a really childlike FE as an absolute value, to be perceived as somebody who's desirable to be there without having to actually go. Because you know, if you actually go and do it, then you get stuck in the brambles of actually having to interface live with FE, you know.
Yeah.
Nothing's more FE requiring than a party.
Yeah. It's not comfortable for some people. Eric, look, it was lovely to chat, but I am going to have to go. I had loads of fun.
All right, nice chatting with you. That's excellent timing. Feeling like time to wrap up as well. So thanks for being here. And these will be a while till they get published, because they processes this little processing thing with this way of recording it.
Sure. And also, I don't know if you want to put that today, or do one of those premiere things. Maybe do it like for tomorrow evening. That would be great. And because this evening, I don't think I'll be able to participate, but I would love to, maybe in the comments, if you had a
okay, I'll schedule one of these for tomorrow evening. Okay.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
That's
you enjoy
tomorrow evening, your time or my time? Your time. So like this time of day, but tomorrow.
That'd be perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Like 8 p.m. tomorrow UK time.
All right. Cool.
Thank you. Lovely chatting. Bye.
Bye.